Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. I zipped up Sarah's suitcase, my hands lingering on the smooth fabric. All packed and ready for your girl's trip, honey? I asked, forcing a smile. Sarah beamed at me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Thanks, Michael. You're the best husband a girl could ask for. I chuckled, lifting the heavy suitcase with ease. Well, someone's got to make sure you don't forget your sunscreen. We both know how you burn. We made our way downstairs, the suitcase thumping against each step. I loaded it into the trunk of our car, slamming it shut with a satisfying thud. The drive to the airport was filled with Sarah's animated chatter about her upcoming week in Hawaii. I nodded along, my mind already racing with plans for our anniversary surprise. You sure you'll be okay without me for a whole week? Sarah asked as we pulled up to the departures terminal. I laughed, reaching over to squeeze her hand. I think I can manage. Besides, I've got a few projects to keep me busy. Sarah leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to my lips. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, I replied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Have a great time. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. I watched as Sarah disappeared into the crowded terminal, her suitcase rolling behind her. As soon as she was out of sight, I let out a deep breath. Time to get to work. The drive home was quiet, my excitement building with each mile. I'd been planning this renovation for months, saving up and sketching designs. Our bedroom was about to get a complete overhaul, and Sarah would never see it coming. I pulled into our driveway, eager to get started. The garage was already stocked with supplies. Fresh paint, new hardwood flooring, and the custom-built furniture I'd been working on in secret. As I stepped into our bedroom, I surveyed the space, mentally mapping out where everything would go. The dresser would need to be moved first, then the closet cleared out. I started with Sarah's winter coats, carefully removing them from hangers and folding them into boxes. That's when I saw a small, nondescript cardboard box tucked away in the back corner of the closet. Curiosity got the better of me. I reached for the box, expecting to find old photos or maybe some forgotten keepsakes. What I found instead knocked the wind out of me. Photos. Dozens of them. Explicit images of Sarah with different men, their faces clear as day. My stomach churned as I flipped through them, each one a fresh knife to the gut. But that wasn't all. Buried beneath the photos were several burner phones. With shaking hands, I turned one on. Messages popped up, confirming my worst fears. I sank to the floor, the evidence of Sarah's betrayal scattered around me. 16 years of marriage, and it had all been a lie. The shock gave way to a cold, hard anger that settled in my chest. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think clearly. I needed to document everything. Grabbing my phone, I methodically photographed each piece of evidence, my jaw clenched tight. As I worked, my mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many men? How could she look me in the eye every day, knowing what she was doing behind my back? One thing was certain: Sarah would pay for this. I may have been blind before, but now my eyes were wide open, and I would make damn sure she regretted ever crossing me. The next few days passed in a blur of investigation and planning. I pored over the burner phones, each message and call log adding fuel to the fire burning inside me. Sarah's betrayal ran deep, spanning nearly our entire marriage. I created a secure digital vault, storing copies of every damning piece of evidence I uncovered. No way was I letting her weasel out of this. As the extent of Sarah's infidelity became clear, I knew I needed advice. I called up my best friend, David Clark, and asked him to meet me for a drink. David was already seated at the bar when I arrived, a concerned look on his face. Michael, what's going on? You sounded pretty serious on the phone. I slid onto the stool next to him, signaling the bartender for a whiskey. I need your lawyer brain, David, and your discretion. His eyebrows shot up, but he nodded. Of course. What's happened? I took a long swig of my drink, letting the alcohol burn down my throat. Sarah's been cheating on me. For years. David's eyes widened. Jesus, Mike, are you sure? I pulled out my phone, showing him a few of the tamer photos I discovered. Pretty damn sure. He let out a low whistle. I'm so sorry, man. What are you going to do? That's where you come in, I said, my voice hard. I want to destroy her, David. Legally, financially, socially, everything. David studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, we need to be smart about this. First things first, don't confront her yet. We need to gather more evidence, build an airtight case. I leaned in, hanging on his every word. What do I do when she gets back? Act normal, David advised. Don't give her any reason to suspect, you know. In fact, it might be good to lull her into a false sense of security. Make her think everything's fine. A plan began to form in my mind. The bedroom renovation. I'll keep working on it, like nothing's changed. David nodded approvingly. Good thinking. It'll keep you busy and maintain the status quo. Meanwhile, we'll start planning our next steps. We spent the next hour strategizing, David's legal expertise proving invaluable. By the time we parted ways, I felt more in control, my path forward clear. Back at home, I threw myself into the renovation with renewed vigor. Each nail I hammered, each board I sanded, was a step closer to my revenge. As I worked, I imagined Sarah's face when I finally confronted her. The shock, the fear, the realization that her carefully constructed web of lies was about to come crashing down around her. She had no idea what was coming, and I would make sure she never saw it coming. The day of Sarah's return arrived, and I steeled myself for the performance of a lifetime. I plastered on a smile as I drove to the airport, mentally rehearsing my lines. Sarah emerged from the terminal, her face lighting up when she saw me. It took every ounce of self-control not to recoil as she threw her arms around me. Michael, oh, I missed you so much, she exclaimed, peppering my face with kisses. I forced a laugh, returning her embrace. Missed you too, honey. How was the trip? As we drove home, Sarah chattered away about Hawaii, her friends, and all the fun they'd had. I nodded and smiled, all the while imagining how satisfying it would be to wipe that grin off her face. So, what did you get up to while I was gone? Sarah asked as we pulled into our driveway. I grinned, genuinely this time. Oh, just a little project. Come on, I'll show you. I led her upstairs, watching her reaction as she took in the newly renovated bedroom. Her gasp of delight was almost convincing. Michael, it's beautiful. You did all this in a week? I shrugged, playing modest. I wanted to surprise you. Actually, I've been thinking, we should celebrate. Sarah turned to me, eyebrows raised. Celebrate? Our anniversary, I explained. I know it's not for a couple of weeks, but why not throw a big party? Invite all our friends and family, really make a night of it. Sarah hesitated, a flicker of something worry crossing her face. I don't know, Michael. That seems like a lot of work. I pressed on, my voice filled with fake enthusiasm. Come on, it'll be fun. We've been married for 16 years, Sarah. That's worth celebrating, don't you think? She wavered for a moment, then smiled. You're right. Let's do it. Over the next few days, Sarah threw herself into party planning. I watched her make calls, send invitations, and fuss over decorations, all while maintaining my supportive husband act. What do you think about these centerpieces? Sarah asked one evening, showing me some elaborate floral arrangements. I nodded approvingly. They look great, honey. Whatever you think is best. As Sarah continued to plan, oblivious to the storm brewing, I finalized my own preparations. Every detail was in place, every piece of evidence ready. The party would be Sarah's crowning achievement and her ultimate downfall. I could hardly wait to see it all come crashing down around her. With each passing day, my anticipation grew. Soon, very soon, Sarah would learn the true cost of her betrayal, and I would be there to watch her world burn. The day of our anniversary party arrived, and I watched with satisfaction as our house filled with guests. The living room was a sea of familiar faces, all oblivious to the bomb I was about to drop. I mingled, shaking hands and accepting congratulations with a practiced smile. Michael, you've outdone yourself, our neighbor, Tom, exclaimed, clapping me on the back. 16 years, huh? What's your secret? I chuckled, the sound hollow to my ears. Oh, you know, trust, communication, all the usual stuff. Sarah flitted from group to group, the perfect hostess in her little black dress. My jaw clenched as I watched her laugh and chat, knowing the truth behind her facade. "Everything okay, man?" David asked, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of champagne. I accepted one, downing it in a single gulp. "It's showtime," I muttered. David squeezed my shoulder. "You sure about this?" I nodded, my resolve hardening. Never been more sure of anything in my life. The party was in full swing when I clinked my glass, calling for everyone's attention. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to me. "Friends, family," I began, my voice steady. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our 16th anniversary. Sarah, honey, why don't you come up here?" Sarah made her way through the crowd, beaming. She stood beside me, her hand on my arm. If only she knew. 16 years, I continued. That's a long time. A lot can happen. A lot of trust can be built or broken. Sarah's grip on my arm tightened. I could feel her tension, see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Sarah, my dear wife," I said, turning to face her. "You've given me so many memories over the years, but it seems you've been making quite a few memories of your own." Confusion rippled through the room. Sarah's smile faltered. "Michael, what are you talking about?" I reached behind the nearby curtain, pulling out the box I'd stashed there earlier. "Why don't we share some of those memories with our guests?" Sarah's face drained of color as I opened the box, revealing the stack of photos and burner phones. "Michael, don't." But I was already holding up the first photo, a particularly explicit one of Sarah with a man I didn't recognize. Gasps echoed through the room. "This," I announced, my voice ringing with cold fury, "is what our marriage has really been. A sham. A lie." I began passing out photos, watching as shock and disgust spread across our guests' faces. Sarah stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. 16 years, I spat. 16 years of me being faithful, loving, trusting. And all the while, you were screwing half the town behind my back. Sarah finally found her voice. "How dare you?" she shrieked, lunging for the box. I held it out of her reach. "Those are private." I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "Private? Like our marriage was supposed to be?" "Sorry, honey, but your privacy went out the window the moment you decided to cheat." Our guests watched in horrified fascination as Sarah's carefully crafted image crumbled. Some were already edging towards the door, eager to escape the unfolding drama. "You bastard," Sarah hissed, her eyes flashing with rage. "You think you can humiliate me like this? I'll destroy you, Michael. I'll take everything you have." I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "Go ahead and try. But remember, I'm not the one who broke our vows. I'm not the one who threw away 16 years of marriage for a few cheap thrills." Sarah's hand cracked across my face, the slap echoing in the stunned silence. I didn't flinch, just stared her down as tears of fury and humiliation welled in her eyes. "Get out," I said, my voice cold and final. "Pack your things and get the hell out of my house." As Sarah stormed upstairs, the party dissolved into chaos. Guests hurried out, whispering and shooting me pitying glances. I stood in the midst of it all, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage, feeling nothing but a grim sense of satisfaction. The truth was out, and this was just the beginning. The house felt cavernous and empty in the days following the party. I wandered from room to room, surrounded by the debris of our shattered life together. Half-empty glasses and discarded party favors littered every surface, a stark reminder of how quickly everything had fallen apart. The incessant ringing of my phone finally broke through my haze. David's name flashed on the screen. "Michael," he said without preamble. "Sarah's lawyer just called. They're filing for divorce." I let out a humorless laugh. "Well, that didn't take long." "This is serious, Mike." David's voice was tense. "They're going for the jugular. Full division of assets, alimony, the works." "Let them try," I growled. "I've got more than enough evidence of her infidelity." David sighed. "It's not that simple. We're in a no-fault state, remember? Her cheating doesn't automatically mean you get to keep everything." The reality of the situation began to sink in. "So what? I'm just supposed to roll over and let her take half of what I've worked for?" Of course not, David replied. But we need to be smart about this. Can you come to my office? We need to start building our case. I agreed, hanging up with a renewed sense of purpose. This was war, and I'd be damned if I let Sarah win. Days turned into weeks as the legal battle raged on. Despite David's best efforts, Sarah's ruthless lawyers and her lover's connections proved to be formidable opponents. Each day brought a new defeat, another asset lost. I don't understand, I fumed, pacing David's office. How can she possibly be entitled to this much? David rubbed his temples, looking as frustrated as I felt. The law doesn't care about fairness, Michael. It cares about numbers and technicalities. And right now, those aren't in our favor. I slammed my fist on his desk. This is bullshit. She cheats on me for years, and I'm the one who gets screwed. I know it's not fair, David said softly, but we're not done fighting yet. We'll appeal, look for any loophole we can find. But even as he spoke, I could see the defeat in his eyes. We both knew the truth. I was going to lose far more than just my wife in this divorce. Weeks later, I found myself slumped over the bar at O'Malley's, drowning my sorrows in cheap whiskey. The divorce had been finalized that morning, leaving me with less than half of what I'd started with. Another, I grunted, shoving my empty glass towards the bartender. Don't you think you've had enough? He asked, eyeing me warily. I glared at him. I'll tell you when I've had enough. As he reluctantly refilled my glass, the bar's door swung open. My blood ran cold as I recognized the voices that drifted over. Well, well, well. Look who it is. I turned slowly, coming face to face with Sarah and a tall, smug-looking man I assumed was Brandon Mitchell, her lover and new boyfriend. What's the matter, Michael? Sarah sneered. Drowning your sorrows? I gritted my teeth, fighting the urge to lash out. What do you want, Sarah? Brandon chuckled, wrapping his arm around Sarah's waist. Just wanted to thank you for being such a good sport. That beach house of yours is really something else. My vision blurred with rage. Before I knew what I was doing, I was on my feet, fist connecting with Brandon's jaw. The bar erupted into chaos. Brandon's friends appeared out of nowhere, raining blows down on me. I fought back with everything I had, but I was outnumbered and drunk. As I lay on the floor, tasting blood, Brandon loomed over me. You're pathetic, he spat. You think you can touch me? I've got friends in high places, asshole. You're nothing. They left me there, bruised and humiliated. As the bartender helped me to my feet, a cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. This isn't over, I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. I'll destroy them both if it's the last thing I do. As I stumbled out into the night, my mind was already racing, formulating plans. Sarah and Brandon thought they'd won, but they had no idea what was coming. I'd lost everything once I had nothing left to lose, and that made me more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. I trudged down the sidewalk, my body still aching from the bar fight. David's office loomed ahead, but my mind was elsewhere, consumed by thoughts of revenge. That's when I heard a familiar voice. Well, if it isn't Michael Donovan. Never thought I'd see you looking so defeated. I turned to find Jake, the hammer, Thompson leaning against a nearby building. My high school tormentor had bulked up considerably since our teenage years, his muscled arms covered in tattoos. Jake, I nodded, tensing for a confrontation. What do you want? Jake pushed off the wall, approaching me with a grin. Relax, Donovan. I'm not here to bust your chops. Heard about what went down with your wife. Tough break, man. I eyed him warily. Yeah, well, life's full of surprises. No kidding, Jake chuckled. Speaking of surprises, but you never thought you'd see me on the straight and narrow, huh? I raised an eyebrow. You? Straight and narrow? Jake laughed outright. Well, straightish. I run let's call it a security firm now. Got a good crew, do some work on the side. Nothing too nasty, mind you. As we talked, I found myself opening up to Jake. Maybe it was the lingering effects of the whiskey, or just the need to unburden myself to someone who wasn't caught up in the mess. Before I knew it, I was spilling the whole sordid tale. Jake listened intently, his expression darkening as I recounted Sarah's betrayal and the subsequent fallout. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. That's some heavy shit, Donovan. So what are you gonna do about it? I shrugged, feeling the weight of my helplessness. What can I do? The law's not on my side. Jake's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. Maybe it's time to look outside the law then. I stared at him, a mix of wariness and curiosity stirring in my gut. What are you suggesting? Come meet my crew, Jake said, clapping me on the shoulder. I think we might be able to help each other out. Against my better judgment, I found myself following Jake to a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town. Inside, a group of tough-looking men and women lounged around, eyeing me suspiciously as we entered. Boys and girls, Jake announced, meet Michael Donovan. He's got a bit of a problem, and we're gonna help him solve it. A burly man with a shaved head stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. And why should we help this suit? Jake grinned. Because, Bulldog, our friend Michael here, is about to become our newest member. That is, he turned to me, if you're up for it. I looked around the room, taking in the hard faces and dangerous aura. This was a far cry from my old life, but then again, that life was gone. Destroyed by Sarah and Brandon. What do I have to do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Jake's grin widened. Simple. You fight Bulldog. You win, you're in. Bulldog sneered, clearly not impressed by my less than imposing physique. But as I stared him down, I felt something snap inside me. All the rage, the humiliation, the burning need for revenge. It all came boiling to the surface. Let's do this, I growled. The fight was brutal and dirty. Bulldog had size and strength on his side, but I had nothing left to lose. I took his punches, tasting blood, but I gave as good as I got. Every blow I landed, I imagined it was Brandon's smug face under my fists. In the end, I stood victorious, battered but unbowed. The gang erupted in cheers, Bulldog included, clapping me on the back and welcoming me to the fold. As Jake handed me a beer, he leaned in close. We just got word. Your ex and her new boy toy? They're about to make a big cash withdrawal. Illegal business, if you catch my drift. I took a long pull from the bottle, my mind already racing with possibilities. How big are we talking? Jake's smile was predatory. Big enough to hurt. You in? I nodded, feeling a surge of anticipation. Oh, I'm in. It's time Sarah and Brandon learned that actions have consequences. The gang gathered around as we began to plan. For the first time since discovering Sarah's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. Revenge was within my grasp, and I would stop at nothing to see it through. The night air was crisp as we approached Sarah and Brandon's house, our footsteps muffled by the manicured lawn. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of adrenaline and righteous anger fueling my every move. Jake signaled to the others, his gestures sharp and precise. Remember the plan, he whispered. In and out, clean and quick. I nodded, my grip tightening on the crowbar in my hand. This was it. No turning back now. With practiced ease, Jake picked the lock on the back door. We slipped inside, the darkness enveloping us like a shroud. I led the way, intimately familiar with the layout of the house I'd once called home. Upstairs, I murmured. Master bedroom. We crept up the stairs, every creak of the floorboards setting my nerves on edge. Outside the bedroom door, I paused, listening intently. The sound of deep, even breathing filtered through. They were asleep. Jake nodded to Bulldog, who produced a small canister. A quick spray under the door, and we waited. After a few moments, Jake eased the door open. Sarah and Brandon lay motionless on the bed, dead to the world. I pushed down the surge of emotions at seeing them together, focusing instead on the task at hand. Safe's behind the Picasso, I directed, pointing to the gaudy painting on the far wall. While Jake worked on cracking the safe, I moved to Sarah's vanity. Her jewelry box sat there, taunting me with memories of anniversaries and birthdays past. Without hesitation, I emptied its contents into my bag. Jackpot, Jake whispered, pulling stacks of cash from the safe. Looks like your tip was good, Michael. There's got to be at least 80 grand here. As the others bagged up the cash, I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small package. With grim satisfaction, I planted the illegal substances in Brandon's nightstand drawer. Let's go, I said, taking one last look at the sleeping figures on the bed. We're done here. We slipped out as silently as we'd entered, leaving no trace of our presence. As we drove away, the weight of the stolen cash in my lap, I felt a surge of triumph. This was just the beginning of Sarah and Brandon's downfall. The next day, we gathered at the warehouse to divvy up our spoils. The mood was celebratory, beers flowing freely as Jake counted out shares. To Michael, Bulldog roared, raising his bottle. The new guy with the golden tip. I accepted the toast with a grin, riding high on our success. That's when Jake pulled me aside, his expression serious. "Just got word from my contact," he said in a low voice. "That cash? It's dirty. Part of Brandon's side business. They can't report it stolen without incriminating themselves." I laughed, the sound harsh and satisfied. "Perfect. They're in deeper than they know." Jake nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You know, Michael, I think you're going to fit in just fine around here." As we rejoined the celebration, I couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging. These people, rough as they were, had my back, more than Sarah ever had. For the first time in months, I felt truly alive. The game had changed, and now I held all the cards. Sarah and Brandon's reckoning was coming, and I would be there to watch it all burn down. The peace of the early morning was shattered by the roar of engines. I jerked awake, stumbling to the window of the warehouse loft where I'd crashed after the celebration. A convoy of black SUVs had pulled up outside, disgorging a small army of tough-looking men. "Jake!" I shouted, grabbing for my clothes. "We've got company." The warehouse erupted into chaos as everyone scrambled to their feet. Jake appeared at my side, his face grim as he peered out the window. "Looks like Brandon's brought some friends," he muttered. "This could get ugly." We barely had time to gather our wits before the warehouse door burst open. Brandon strode in, flanked by his goons, his face a mask of rage. "Donovan," he bellowed, "I know you're here, you son of a bitch. Where's my money?" I descended the stairs slowly, making sure Brandon saw me. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with murderous intent. "Brandon," I said calmly, "lose something?" He lunged forward, only to be held back by Jake and Bulldog. "You think this is a game?" he snarled. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I laughed, the sound cold and mocking. "Oh, I think I do. A two-bit criminal who likes to play big shot. How's it feel, Brandon? Knowing you can't even keep your dirty money safe?" Brandon's face contorted with fury. "You're dead, Donovan. You and your little gang of thugs. I'll bury you all." The tension in the room was palpable, both sides coiled and ready to spring. That's when we heard it, the distant wail of police sirens. Panic flashed across Brandon's face. "What did you do?" he hissed. I smiled, savoring the moment. "Me? Nothing. But it seems someone might have made an anonymous tip about certain substances in your house. Funny how these things work out, isn't it?" The color drained from Brandon's face as the implications sank in. He turned to run, but Jake's crew was faster. In moments, Brandon and his men were subdued, trussed up like Christmas turkeys. As the police sirens grew louder, Jake turned to me. "We need to scatter." "You good?" I nodded, my eyes never leaving Brandon's defeated form. "Yeah, I've got one last thing to take care of." While Jake and the others melted away into hidden exits, I approached Brandon. Kneeling down, I grabbed a fistful of his hair, forcing him to look at me. "Remember when you said I was nothing?" I growled. "Look at you now. Everything you had, everything you stole from me, it's all going up in smoke. And the best part? Sarah's going down with you." Brandon's eyes widened in fear and realization. "You can't." "Watch me," I snarled, standing up. "Enjoy prison, Brandon. I hear they love guys like you in there." I walked away, Brandon's curses fading behind me as I slipped out a back entrance. In the distance, I could see police cars converging on Brandon and Sarah's house. A grim smile played on my lips as I imagined Sarah's face when they found the planted drugs. As I melted into the shadows of the city, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was done. Sarah and Brandon would pay for their betrayal, not just to me, but to the law. Their perfectly crafted life would crumble, just as mine had. But unlike them, I would rise from the ashes, stronger, harder, and with a new family at my back. Let Sarah and Brandon rot. I had a new life to live. The adrenaline from our recent victory had barely worn off when I found myself wandering the streets, mind racing with possibilities for my next move. That's when I spotted him, a man slumped on a park bench, his face a mask of despair. Something about his demeanor caught my attention. I approached cautiously, my instincts honed from months with Jake's crew. "Hey, you all right?" I asked, keeping my distance. The man looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "Does it look like I'm all right?" I shrugged, taking a seat next to him. "Fair point. Want to talk about it?" He hesitated. Then the words came tumbling out. "My name's John. John Miller. My wife, she's dying. Cancer. We can't afford the treatment she needs." I felt a twinge in my chest, memories of my own lost love momentarily surfacing before I shoved them back down. "That's rough, man. How much do you need?" John laughed bitterly. "More than I'll ever have. The hospital bills alone are in the tens of thousands. I've sold everything, worked 3 jobs. It's not enough. It's never enough." I sat there, mulling over his words. The stack of cash from our heist burned in my pocket. Money that, by all rights, should have been mine to begin with. What if? I started, then paused. Was I really considering this? What if I told you I might be able to help? John's head snapped up, hope and suspicion warring in his eyes. "What do you mean? Who are you?" I held out my hand. "Name's Michael, and let's just say I recently came into some money that needs a good home." John stared at my outstretched hand, clearly torn. I can't accept charity. You don't even know me." I laughed. "Trust me, it's not charity. Consider it karma balancing the scales. Now, you want to save your wife or not?" After a moment's hesitation, John grasped my hand. I pulled him to his feet, a plan already forming in my mind. "Come on," I said. "I've got some friends I need you to meet." The warehouse was quiet when we arrived, most of the crew still laying low after our recent escapade. Jake looked up as we entered, his eyebrows raising at the sight of John. "Michael," he said slowly, "who's your friend?" I quickly explained John's situation, watching Jake's expression shift from suspicion to intrigue. "So let me get this straight," Jake said when I finished. "You want to use our hard-earned cash to pay for a stranger's medical bills?" I met his gaze steadily. "That's right. Got a problem with that?" Jake held my stare for a long moment, then burst out laughing. "Damn, Donovan. Just when I think I've got you figured out." "All right, boys," he called out to the rest of the crew. "Looks like we're playing Robin Hood today." The next few hours passed in a blur. We pooled our resources, gathering enough to cover John's wife's treatment and then some. The look of stunned gratitude on John's face as we handed over the cash was something I'll never forget. I don't know what to say," John stammered, tears in his eyes. "How can I ever repay you?" I clapped him on the shoulder. "Just make sure your wife gets better. That's payment enough." As John left, practically floating with relief, I felt a strange sense of lightness. For the first time since Sarah's betrayal, I'd done something purely good, something that couldn't be tainted by anger or revenge. Jake sidled up next to me, watching John's retreating figure. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "that felt pretty damn good. Maybe we should do more of this Robin Hood shtick." I turned to him, a slow smile spreading across my face. "You know what? Maybe we should." In the weeks that followed, a restlessness began to grow within me. The thrill of helping John had awakened something, a desire for more. More than revenge, more than the adrenaline rush of our heists. I found Jake in his usual spot, feet up on his desk, nursing a beer. "We need to talk," I said without preamble. Jake's eyebrows shot up. "Sounds serious. What's on your mind, Donovan?" I took a deep breath. "I'm leaving." Jake sat up straight, his expression a mix of surprise and... was that disappointment? Leaving? Where to? "Europe," I said, the plan solidifying as I spoke. "I need a fresh start, Jake. A clean slate." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Can't say I'm surprised. You've never really fit in here, have you?" Too much of a Boy Scout. I laughed. Says the guy who helped pay a stranger's medical bills. Jake grinned, then grew serious. You sure about this, Michael? You've become family here. We take care of our own. The words hit me harder than I expected. Family. It had been a long time since I'd felt that. I'm sure, I said softly. But thank you. For everything. Jake stood, pulling me into a rough embrace. Don't get sappy on me now, Donovan. Come on, let's give you a proper send-off. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. With David's help, I arranged for a new identity, complete with passport and backstory. Michael Donovan would cease to exist, replaced by a man with no past and a future full of possibilities. The night before my departure, the gang threw a raucous farewell party. As I looked around at these people who had become my unlikely allies, I felt a pang of, not regret, exactly, but a bittersweet acknowledgement of what I was leaving behind. Bulldog, of all people, was the most emotional. You watch yourself out there, yeah? He said gruffly, clapping me on the back hard enough to make me stagger. Europe's full of pansies. They won't know what hit him when you show up. I laughed, returning the back slap. I'll do my best to uphold our reputation. As the party wound down, Jake pulled me aside. Got something for you, he said, pressing a thick envelope into my hands. A little going-away present from the crew. I opened it to find a stack of clean, untraceable cash. Jake, I can't. He held up a hand, cutting me off. You can, and you will. Consider it severance pay. Use it to build that new life of yours. Emotion thick in my throat, I nodded. Thank you. For everything. Jake grinned, punching my arm lightly. Yeah. Don't go getting all soft on me now. Just take care of yourself out there, all right? As I left the warehouse for the last time, I felt a chapter of my life closing. But rather than sadness, all I felt was anticipation for what lay ahead. The small European town sprawled out before me, a picturesque jumble of old-world charm and modern convenience. As I stepped off the train, luggage in hand, I took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. This was it, my new beginning. Finding work was easier than I'd anticipated. My skills as a carpenter were in high demand in a town that prided itself on its traditional craftsmanship. Within days, I'd secured a position with a local woodworking shop. You have talented hands, my new boss, Heinrich, commented as he watched me work. Where did you learn such skill? I paused, memories of long hours in my old workshop flashing through my mind. It's a family tradition, I said simply. It wasn't entirely a lie. As the weeks passed, I found myself settling into a rhythm. Work during the day, exploring my new home in the evenings. Slowly but surely, the weight I'd been carrying began to lift. One evening, as I sat at a local cafe, nursing a beer and watching the sunset, a voice broke into my reverie. Is this seat taken? I looked up to see a woman about my age, her smile warm and inviting. Please, I gestured to the empty chair. Be my guest. She sat, extending her hand. I'm Sophia. You're new in town, aren't you? I shook her hand, returning her smile. That obvious, huh? I'm me, Max. I caught myself, remembering my new identity. Max Weber. Sophia's eyes twinkled with amusement. Well, Max Weber, welcome to our little corner of the world. What brings you here? I considered my words carefully. A fresh start, I said finally. Needed to leave some things behind and figure out what's next. Sophia nodded, understanding in her eyes. We all need that sometimes. A chance to reinvent ourselves. As we talked, the sun dipping below the horizon and stars beginning to twinkle overhead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, the best was yet to come. Later that night, as I stood on the balcony of my small apartment, looking out over the twinkling lights of the town, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. Sarah, Brandon, the gang. They all felt like characters from a story I'd read long ago. Important, yes, but no longer central to my narrative. I thought of John and his wife, hoping they'd found their happy ending. Of Jake and the crew, wondering what new adventures they were getting into. And of Sophia, the promise of new friendship, and maybe more. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt truly at peace. The past was behind me, its lessons learned but its power over me broken. The future stretched out before me, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. As I turned to head inside, a cool breeze carrying the scent of pine and possibility, I smiled to myself. This wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.